Hey, it's Liz D'Alto, and this is the Untamed the Wild Soul Woman podcast. From body image, sex, spirituality, money and relationships, to motherhood, creativity, business, communication, and desire, Untamed the Wild Soul Woman is the place to come for real stories and powerful advice to help you reclaim and redefine womanhood in the 21st century. Welcome to episode number 139 of the Untamed the Wild Soul podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth D'Alto, and today's episode is a fun and rich conversation with a like-mind, body-souled woman doing her untamed thing in her very unique and powerful way in the world, Rashida KhanBey. What I admire so much about Rashida is her resilience. As a Black woman, a full-figured woman, and a lesbian, she has faced all kinds of shaming and discrimination in her life. We explore in this conversation how she not only got through it and continues to get through it, but flourishes anyway. Two big aspects of that being creative expression and her relationship to God. We went all in on the God conversation in this interview, and I'm hoping for those who don't prefer to use the term God, or maybe don't directly relate to it, you can hang in there with us anyway and get the nuggets that apply to any belief system. And for those of you who were down with the God, maybe there will be some new or interesting insights. Maybe you'll have some of your own to share in the Facebook group after, plus lots more. This is a rich, really fun conversation. Enjoy, and let's get started. Here we are. This is take two for those of you that are tuning in. I was bummed because I got to interview Rashida a couple weeks ago, and it was such a great conversation. And then when my ops girl who edits the interviews went in, she's like, there's like 4 different files and they're all like 60 seconds. I was like, no. But, really stuff like that doesn't happen. Obviously, this conversation is going to be the conversation people need to hear. Maybe it was just an excuse for us to hang out.
Yes.
There are a couple things that I know we talked about that for sure I'm going to ask you to tell again because they were awesome. So, Rashida, welcome back. Thank you for being willing to take the time again. So who knows? And maybe your answer is different 2 weeks later. What do you love about being a woman?
Mm-hmm. Well, I love that we are about to have our first woman president this week. Like the energy and the vibration like around this election is, has been chaotic leading up to now. But, this week I'm filled with a lot of hope and a lot of promise, especially after watching the closing video that she just released. I'm just very excited for that possibility that, we can add that now to the list of things that you can tell, your daughter or your niece or any young girl in your life that you love that's a possibility for you.
That's cool. So during our first conversation, I don't remember exactly what you said, but I know we got right into some of the cool things that led you to doing your work in the world, which is called Woman Untamed. And I remember you talked about growing up in the church, and what was it called? The dance?
Oh, praise dance.
Praise dance. And I was so excited to learn what this was. So can you tell us again, what is praise dance and how did that influence you developing this body of work that you do now?
Okay. So I can actually give like a little more detail because my mom, we went to go see a show this week and she reminded me of the reason why she put me in dance classes, when I was young, and then also why she tried to encourage me to get into the dance ministry. So apparently I had like really bad anxiety as a kid and I just clung to her like no other. It was probably a little bit more than just a kid wanting her mom. And so, in order to kind of get me to like be active and socialize with some of the other things, like she put me in dance, and then she also put me in the praise dance ministry. So praise dance it's similar. We call it in the Christian church, like it's a form of ministry. So, how like the preacher will get up and they do their service, and then you have the deacons, and then you have people who, specifically do like social justice ministry. So it's like everyone has their specific ministry that they feel called to. And then, so praise dance is just using dance as a vehicle for healing for the congregation, but specifically using dance, So yeah, that's, that was kind of like, that was really like the beginning behind my work. I think the reason why I'm probably doing a lot of the work that I'm doing today was, that start. I'm sorry, if you see my dog, he's going crazy.
I love it. Hey, the show is called We Both Have Businesses with the word Untamed in it. Animals welcome.
Yeah, come here. He's not. Say hi, Rocky.
What's up, Rocky? Welcome to the show. This is our first animal on the podcast. So for anyone listening, you can't see him, but he's adorable.
Yes.
So for anyone who's not already familiar with what you do, can you say a little bit more about what is your work at Woman Untamed?
So Woman Untamed is dedicated to really helping women come back to life in their bodies and to step out of numbness, to step out of the disappointment, to step out of the chaos, just so they can really find that overflow. I used to kind of word it like peace, passion, purpose, and praise, like in your life, like just really finding that place of goodness and, just like true bliss and ecstasy. Because so I think that, a lot of the things that we can experience in life can really take us away from, being able to tap into that peace of mind or being able to tap into our joy. And, it's not a healthy way to live, one, because, living in numbness or, just living in tension, it causes, it can wreak havoc on your body. And I've experienced that firsthand. But, it's just like life is just too good, to just continue to miss out on all of the goodness that's available. So through dance, it reconnects women to their body. Now that's a very big phrase. Like, what does it mean to reconnect to your body? But it gives you a way to, how people say like, meditation will help you with, like still your mind or still your thoughts. And like prayer will help you like surrender. And dance is really like, it's almost like a hybrid combination of prayer and meditation, but that involves your entire body.
I love that. I totally agree too.
Yeah. So it gets you moving. It starts moving the energy and the tension and the negative whatever that might be kind of like keeping you feeling weighted. It moves it around so that you're open. The point is that the dancing makes you feel open. It makes you feel you're open enough that you can receive. And that when you're in that place of being able to receive the guidance, receive spirit, receive God, receive life, that you start to live your best life. But you can't, it's almost like, you can't pull water or pull like water from an empty vessel. You know what I mean? So you have to be open. Or from a closed off vessel.
Yeah.
So you have to be open enough in order to be able to receive whatever that will fill you up. So yeah.
So I remember also asking you what it was like because you said something so great when we chatted last time about really almost finding God or experiencing God through your own sensuality. So I want to ask you a two-part question. I want you to jam on that a little bit and kind of describe how that was and how that is for you now. And then I also want to go to the point about how did you reconcile that like within a Christian church? Because upon hearing on it, it doesn't sound like two things that would go together, but I know in your experience, they really did. So you can start with whichever question you want.
Okay. So repeat the first question for me one more time.
So I remember you saying something so great about experiencing God or accessing God through your sensuality.
Yes.
How'd that work? What was that like?
So I actually did my second study abroad to Salvador de Bahia, Brazil in college. And I was, I was the first time I went to Brazil, I was a preteen. I was with my mom and I was with my church family, and we were doing like a cultural like exchange type of program, and just really learning about the transatlantic slave trade and the influence of Black culture on Brazil. And so the second time around when I had the opportunity to go, and funny story is, I actually got broken up with on a voicemail. And I was like, I was so in my head, I was just so done, like getting this voicemail and being broken up with. I was just like, okay, I gotta do something. And so the next day I was in the study abroad office, and I'm like, I want to go somewhere this summer. That was kind of like, it's funny when I think about it now, because that's actually a big point of the work, is that there's always some moment of initiation. Like there's a moment of initiation that brings you into like whatever deeper knowledge you need to know. And I think that breakup, sent me on this journey that would, start to become what I felt called to do with my life. And so, I'm in the study abroad office, and, I'm like, I'm 18, 19, and like, I want to wear a Brazilian bikini. If you don't know what a Brazilian bikini is, it's like nothing. It's a string, and that's it. And I have a lot of body. Like, I've always had a lot of body. I mean, I've got really big boobs and thighs and hips and booty. Like, so I don't know why I was so drawn to wanting to wear this nothing, because I'm like, I'm just going to look like I'm out there naked. But I was like, I must, So I get to Brazil, I get my bikini, I'm ready. And I'm walking down the beach. I get it on. I'm walking down the beach with one of the guys in my program. And, we were just talking. I can't even remember what we were talking about. But then all of a sudden, this man, he like stops his soccer game and he bows at my feet. And he's just like worshiping me and worshiping my body. And I was just like, I was kind of stuck, because I didn't really know how to respond to that, because I've never had that type of admiration or praise like given to my body, before that moment. I think a lot of the conversation around my body was, especially growing up as a dancer, you're too big, you're too this, you're too that. I mean, I've literally had teachers tell me that I was too fat to ever be considered serious. I mean, just a lot of really harsh, just a lot of harsh language around my body image, that I think that in some ways I just had to kind of like push back and like not even think about it in order to keep going as a, in order to keep training, because, eventually at some point I stopped training at that intensity. But it was just a lot. So that's a whole nother story. But so he bowed at my feet, and it was like totally respectful. If you can imagine someone bowing at your feet and what that feels like. But like, he wasn't trying to touch me or grab me or like get my number or anything like that. He just stopped his game and was just, like in awe of what he saw. And I was like, wow, like, this is crazy. And that really shifted the way that I saw my body. And I started wearing like tank tops and short skirts and like, stuff that I was never given permission to wear those things, because I wasn't small. I wasn't, I wasn't thin like a lot of the girls that were around me were growing up. And so, even down to like, I've had teachers tell me like, well, don't come to class with your stomach out unless it's flat. And it's just, hearing those kind of things at like 13 and 14, like those, just.
Who, like, that quote, there's a special place in hell for women who don't support other women. Yeah. I think there's a special place in hell for grown-ups who say shit like that to children.
Oh, yes.
God. And,
I have no idea how I powered through all of those things, but, it was definitely like a hard blow, like each and every time, to my own sense of security. And, just even training pre-professionally, and at that age, you're already just like exposed to way too much, you know? And so to have that other layer on top of it, you know, it became too much. And I finally was like, you know what, I'm not gonna keep going down this road. Let me explore what theater is about. Which is a whole nother conversation too. But so I had that experience with this guy bowing at my feet and blah blah blah. And he was, it was just really great, and it affirmed for me, like, it just affirmed for me, like, that I could see myself as like beautiful and desirable and wanted. And then also being in Brazil, where, the society standard of what is beautiful is just very different from what we, consider, what people consider beautiful here in the West. And so, the thin bodies are prized over everything, and that's just it. Versus in Brazil, you'll see a lot more women who, have, bigger bodies, and, they are loved just as much. And it's not even like a hierarchy or anything like that. It's just like they're seen as beautiful as well,
Yeah, that's a cool way of saying it, like beautiful as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so the second part of that question was, how did you reconcile, like, we were talking about, how you access God through your sensuality, and it sounded like there was a lot of self praise, acceptance, and appreciation for your physical body, which is something that had been really obscenely criticized, which like makes me angry at adults, but we don't have to go there on that right now. And then, so it was gonna be like, and how was that reconciled within your own experience and also within your church? Because, growing up Catholic, obviously different sect of Christianity, but still Christian, the idea of combining sensuality and God just doesn't sound like it would have flown in my area.
Yeah. You know what? To be honest, like, that's, at the time, while our church was very radical for even including praise dance, because I think we talked about this on the last time we had this talk, that, praise, like, it's like a lot of churches, it was an absolute no for anybody dancing in the church.
Yeah.
And so, and that, stems from, the church's relationship to the body, and, and believing that, the sin of the flesh, and, really misinterpreting, like, what it means to, like, really have a connection to your sensuality and your sexuality, and have a relationship with God. Because at some point, throughout history, and St. Augustine's, own chaos with his sexuality, we adopted this view that, if you had a relationship with your sexuality, you were just far off, you were gone, you were a witch, that was it. You couldn't be pure and love God and want to have sex, like, not even married couples. And I believe, like, there's some history around, like, tithing starting as, like, a penance for married couples who had sex for pleasure.
No way, I never heard of that.
And so that, that was all under St. Augustine's rule, and, like, as a way to get, money into the church, and as a way to, to prohibit people from, having sex for pleasure and not just for kids. Like, you had to come, you had to pray, you had to pay your penance, and that was your tithing to the church. So, and I've talked about this before in an interview where, if you go back to, like, Genesis, where it's like in the garden, and, God is with Adam and Eve, and they're naked. That was how they were created. They were naked, they were shameless, they were just out there, like, loving life, like, eating the fruit, getting busy, like, enjoying, like, being with each other. And, like, that was it, And then, like, there was this, they, like, Eve wanted to know, like, why is it that we can't eat this fruit? And, of course, there's all the history around, like, well, women are evil because she tricked him into sin, and da-da-da-da. No, Adam had his own volition, and he decided to give in with her. So,
right.
Two separate.
And again, love that everyone thinks women are so powerful that he had absolutely no free will against her influence.
But the first thing that God says in the scripture, once he figures out that they ate the fruit, he says, who told you that you were naked? It doesn't say, well, how dare you eat the fruit? The first question is, who told you you were naked? Because as soon as they ate the fruit, they became ashamed of their bodies. They became ashamed of each other. They became ashamed of the natural state that they were made in, which was their nakedness, the purity of sensuality, the purity of just being able to revel in, like, in the emotional sense, being naked with God, and in the physical sense, just being naked in your body. And the first question God asks is, who told you that you were naked? And I think that it was like God was trying to protect us from this, like, this cultural shame that would ensue as soon as we ate the fruit. And the fruit really is shame, and we pick up the shame consciously and subconsciously every day in our lives. And so that reconciliation, like, never really came from my church. I think that in a lot of ways, one coming out as a lesbian and then being Christian and then wanting to have this radical public relationship with my sexuality and not be ashamed of that.
And you're still active in your church, right?
I'm at a different church now. I joined the church that my partner attended before we got together. And, so it's like, but I mean, there's still like common threads throughout every church. But
yeah.
The one thing that I found in the space that I'm in now, and it's led by a woman pastor, which I've never experienced before. And she is just, she's truly just like a radical, mystical being all of her own. And, one of the things that I was really drawn to the experience of this church, because my partner is a masculine presenting woman. And so, that in and of itself, like, she can walk into a church and they would dismiss her,
right.
And she's had that experience before. She's had the experience where, pastors or, leaders in the church have told her that she was demonic because she was gay. And, just thinking of that, the mental turmoil that would take someone on, being told that you are, that your core essence is demonic. Like, I just can't, it makes me angry.
I can't. I want to interrupt you for a second. It sounds like you have pretty good knowledge of the Bible. You may or may not know the answer to this question, but does it actually say anywhere that, men should not be with men and women should not be with women?
There is one scripture that says men should not lay with men the way that they would lay with their wives, but there is, I believe that there's another context behind that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it has the insinuation of homosexuality like we see. And what I've learned through biblical study is you can't take it for the surface.
No, it's so metaphorical.
Right. You have to take it
metaphorical.
Right. You have to take it within the context of when it was written,
yep.
the time period, like who wrote it, what were their influences. And it just takes a lot of time. And one of the other stories that people, like to quote a lot when they try to talk about like God against homosexuality is, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. And I, whenever that story comes up, and I'm so glad that I learned this, but, in the scripture, it says like, it doesn't say God, the people are having a good old time. They're having a real good time. And God says, if you can find anyone here that loves me more than they love themselves, I will spare the town. It doesn't say, if you can find somebody here who's not, getting down with another man, if you can find down with another man, then I got y'all. We're not going to cancel this out. I'm not going to destroy it. He literally says, if you can find someone who loves me more than they love themselves. And it was really talking about just being, so caught in your own your wants and your needs and your selfishness and your desires and da-da-da-da. And of course, God is going to give us the desires of our heart. Like, these things are important, but like at the end of the day, they can't be more important than like our willingness to surrender to like God's will.
Totally.
And that will being like peace on earth and like loving people like in the action form, and not will like I'm going to tell you to do this and that's it, but like knowing that being able to walk and talk in like a very a very visceral relationship with God. And so like that's another scripture.
It's a tangent I love. So I geek out on this actual real interpretation of the Bible because, you know, there's so much. And if anyone listening is Christian, we're not here trying to convert you. We're not here going, be Christian, don't be Christian. Like, you guys know that about this show, like to each their own, you're welcome to believe whatever. But I have gone down some rabbit holes. And what's so interesting is how much information is available, readily public record available for anyone who cares to do a little bit of research, that like literally the Bible cannot be taken as fact.
Yeah.
Historically, who wrote it, like there's archaeological, historical, physical evidence that says, nope, that wasn't from that time era. Nope, the likelihood that that person wrote that thing is pretty slim. Not to mention how many like authorities of church bodies it has been passed through and interpreted for the convenience and of patriarchy. So, I mean, there's just so much that you cannot, it's almost, I'll say it this way, you can do whatever you want, but it's pretty irresponsible at this point in the game to be taking it as face value and then turning around and putting it on people for who and how they are.
Yeah. And I think it's also like, it's like being a lazy Christian, you know what I mean? Like if you just take it at face value, because there's so much more texture and depth when you actually like take the time to study and take the time to, you know, interpret, like even, you know, like my pastor, like she'll go back into like, you know, like the Greek and Arabic dictionaries to like look up the different translations of words.
Yeah.
That, you know, it's just so much. There's, you know, and even when you're reading it within that context and knowing what that word meant at this time, it, you know, it just blows open. It has, you know, a completely different, completely different translation. And so, I don't know if I said Greek, but I think
you said Greek and Aramaic, right? Or not, I don't know. But you know, it's actually funny because I was thinking about that. I was thinking, I wonder what's the translation and the different interpretations of the word naked when you were saying naked earlier on, who told you were naked? I mean, I could geek out on this all day. I even got into reading the Gnostic Gospels, like the other ones, like Mary Magdalene, Thomas, Philip, and those are a bit more, they're not filtered through the church. So some of the interpretation, and I was listening to the Gospel of Mary Magdalene on Audible, and the guy who translated that one even said that there's just a couple different ways. Everything has to be kind of taken through. It could have meant this. It could have meant this. It could have meant this.
Yeah. And just knowing that there are that many translations and knowing that there are that many possibilities just means, I mean, it's like the mystery belongs to God. That's, you know, something that I've, you know, really like been focused on in the last year. It's like there's a lot of things that we're not going to be able to figure out. And there's a lot of things that we're not supposed to figure out, you know. That's the part of being a human and being life and having a quest, because if we knew it all, what would really be the point of us living? Like, we'd all have it figured out. We'd all be perfect and not angry and not, you know, like there wouldn't be a need for certain things because we'd have it all together. And that's really the point, is like being able to grow back into, you know, our most divine version of ourselves. But, you know, and I think that even with my own pastor, you know, she just really emphasized like having a relationship with God versus like having this face value, like let me read all these messages, you know, in the scripture. And the fact that when she met my partner years before she and I got together, she looked at her, she didn't know that she wasn't out to her mom at the time. And she looks at my partner and she goes, yeah, my daughter's gay too.
And your partner's mom was standing there?
She's standing there and she's just like her mouth's just open, like, I can't believe this just happened. And, you know, she looked at her and, you know, she looked at her and she said that, you know, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, don't change. Like, don't ever let anyone tell you that it's the way you dress, the way you talk, the way you present, like, there's nothing wrong with you. And, like, you know, just to, you know, in my own, like, beautiful, romantic, whatever. I've never had the experience of worshiping with a partner. And so to have that experience, you know, where you're going into like this deep spiritual practice, like every week or multiple times a week with the person that you're like sharing your body with. And, you know, it's a completely different experience than I've ever had. And I'm very grateful to be in that place. And I think this relationship has been a huge part of my own healing process in reconciling like the sensuality and my spirituality, because, you know, being led to this place where I'm being told to have a relationship and like not just take it at face value on Sundays for an hour or whatever, you know, like really to get into a true frequency with, you know, with the spirit, with the universe, with God, so that my life can become more fulfilling, more rich, more joyful. So yeah. And I think that we left off where I was talking about going into the service in Brazil, and they were preparing for this invocation process to bring, like, where there are certain priests and priestess that can be mounted. Like everyone can't be mounted. Like it's just like you just got something really special in your head, and like the spirit, the different orishas will mount that person, and then that person embodies the spirit. And I mean, like I've had such a crazy, beautiful life of like these like huge spiritual experiences from, you know, different corners. And I've been in another service connected to Santeria, where I've had the person who was mounted started speaking in Yoruba, and I know they don't know Yoruba in their real life, and Yoruba is the language of the Orisha. And so it's like, you know, just to have them like speak to you, and then have someone there that does know Yoruba like translate. I mean, it's unreal. And like it, you know, it was like sitting at God's feet, you know, like I remember, I don't know if your audience is familiar, but with the Orisha Yemanya, and she's like the goddess of the water. It's like all blue, and that was the Orisha that mounted that night. And so she's like walking through the house, like they've got all these altars built for her, and they've been singing the song and invoking her spirit, and just, you know, just like really trying, you know, conjuring the spirit to come into our presence. And, you know, she comes and she holds court, and she's never held court before. And she'll usually only talk to the people who are ordained or initiated priests. And so, but this time I just happened to come to the one service where she, you know, was willing to talk to everyone. And I mean, cool. It was beautiful. And I sat at her feet and wept and wept and wept. And just, you know, just to not have the, you know, a lot of Black Christians especially have a lot of stigma and shame around being connected to their, to the culture of, you know, being African descendants, and what that looks like, and being able to embody, you know, the, you know, African culture. Like there's a lot of stigma and shame around that, especially when you are coming up in a Christian church. And I was just very, you know, blessed to be raised in a church that was really focused on making sure that the congregation knew that we could be unapologetically Black and unashamedly Christian.
So I wanted to ask you, I thought of this actually after our last conversation. Mm-hmm. So in a church like yours, like all the figures, and again, this is one of the things we can never know. We don't know what saint were they white? Were they not white? But conveniently, they're all presented that way in like all the imagery and stuff. So like, what is the imagery like in your church? The statues, like, is it the same? Like,
all Black.
Cool.
All Black.
That's cool.
Yeah. And, you know, just even like, and this is history, and I like, shame on me for like not knowing, but.
I mean, shame on me. There's so much shit I don't know.
No. You know, but you know, it just, I think it's kind of been beat into me mentally, like, you know, just talking about like Jesus and like being, you know, from an African descendant and like what that means. Like his hair was woolly, like the descriptions of him in the Bible, like just don't match, like, you know,
that picture we all see all the time. Yeah.
Like long hair, you know, like I'm all for it, but like it just doesn't match. But you know, I think that if I were to speak about it from a place of compassion, because I know that everybody's on like a spiritual question. And I'm gonna say it's taken me a long time to get to this place, and I still got a lot to do. But I think when you're on that spiritual journey, like everybody just wants to know that someone that looks like you loves you, or or that there is something that is, that there is an essence that believes or wants to give you like unconditional love. And I think that everybody tries to make it into like what they want to see, or like what is, easy for them to accept. I don't know if that's probably not the right way to say it, but
I think it's hard to articulate, but I have a hunch that people listening, I know what you mean. I could like feel it. There's a lot of imagery happening over here for me, and I get it. I hope people listening and watching can kind of connect those dots. And if they can't, that's a cool conversation to bring into the Facebook group. Man, it's so fascinating. And even now, like you were saying, how radical it feels that we might have a female president, which like, I don't want to go down that path and talk about politics, but to me, it would just be insane if we don't. Like, we're recording this on the Monday before the election. Your interview is actually going to come out next Monday. So by the time it comes out, the decision will be made. But it's just like wild what comes up in the collective when things in the overall culture just aren't going to fly anymore. And it sucks that so many crappy things, it's always like shitty things have to happen to get us to have the conversations that we need to be having. Right. But, it's just so interesting, like you're saying, and even as women, whether, black, white, or whatever, for women, it's still exciting to see like a female pastor or a female president and be like, awesome. I imagine what it must have felt like for like Black Americans to have a Black president, be like, all right, like,
oh man. I was thinking about that night, and, I went to UIC, which is like in the midst of Chicago. So like it was very culturally diverse or inclusive instead of diverse. It was very culturally inclusive. And, so I was with a crowd of people from our department. And I mean, the energy that night was just insane. I mean, I was crying, I was shouting, I was,
He's excited too.
Yeah, he's messing with the cat. I don't know what's going on. Rocky, come here.
He's just getting in on the excitement.
He's like, okay, jump. Good boy, jump. Okay. So, but yeah, it was the energy that night was really, really insane, and I'm just glad that I can't believe I've lived through that, and then now also having the opportunity to like, possibly experience like our first woman president like that,
It's kind of crazy to have them back to back, huh?
Right.
I love that. I was thinking about that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
What's up, Wild Ones? Quick break in the episode to invite you to a free training I'm doing the whole month of November. It's happening November 7th, November 14th, November 21st, and November 28th. So there will be 4 live training sessions. It's called Unconsume Yourself, and the premise is this: more is not always better. So this 4-week training is a life detox designed to help you hack away at the unessential. I'm going to help you declutter all areas of your life: mental, physical, emotional, digital, and more, so that you can go into 2017 with more energy and focus to put towards what truly matters to you. This is about sifting through the noise and the distractions so you can really focus, and you can clean up your attitude, your thoughts, your language, and take more focused and more appropriate action to actually move you towards the things you want in your life. So if that sounds good to you, you can register at untameyourself.com unconsume, which is UNCONSUME. So again, register for free at untameyourself.com/unconsume. All of the trainings are recorded. So whether you're catching this before we start on November 7th, or you're catching this later on in November before we finish, you can register at any time and you'll still be able to get access to all of the recordings. Cool? Back to the show.
Oh God, there's so much good stuff here. So something we talked about last time that I wanted to make sure to bring up again is I loved it. And I mean, you almost had me in tears when you were talking about your pastor being so accepting of your partner. But you also talked about your mentor and his story and him coming out and him getting sick and how that was received by the church. And I guess one of my favorite things about you, about these conversations, is you literally have lived through so much progress for our culture, Thank friggin' God. But at the same time, have had to be on the receiving end of so much of the shaming of the unacceptable from the body, from the race, from the sexual orientation. So frigging fortified human over here. Can you tell us that story or whatever you want to share about your mentor and kind of what that experience was like?
Oh, Anthony. So my mentor, Anthony Hollins, who, man, we're coming up on the season of his passing. And it's so interesting because it's almost like it happened a couple weeks ago. Whenever I think about it, that's just how close we were and how much he touched my heart. Even as a teen and a young adult. And just talk about serendipity, or is it serendipity? Is that the right word? Where it's like a coincidence. I don't want to call it a coincidence.
Synchronicity. I think synchronicity.
There you go. And so the night he was getting ready to choreograph a dance for our Thanksgiving dinner, a Thanksgiving service at the church, we did this huge cultural celebration, and they have the men on stilts, and they talk about the transatlantic slave trade, and we do rituals with food, and I mean, it's just a beautiful service. I love it. And so he was getting ready to choreograph a dance for that. And I was on this dance team at UIC, and I was so excited to be on this team, but they benched me because I had a stomach. And they wouldn't let me dance because I didn't have a flat stomach. But mind you, there was a girl, and no shade to her, but she looked like she was about 6 months pregnant on the cheerleading team. And she was able to, I think she might have been pregnant and just didn't want to tell anyone, and that's totally fine. But our bodies were, somewhat similar or whatever. But they were letting her cheer, and they wouldn't let me. And I think that, also just not being thin. And I think it'd be different if I was thin and I had a stomach, because then my body wouldn't look so sexual. But being thick and having hips and booty and breasts, and then having this, it's I'm just all over the place. And I give people a lot of imagery or whatever. But so I dropped the team, and I was just I can't do this anymore. I'm tired of being benched. I paid all this money. I've been training with you all. I'm just forget it. I'm not going to do it anymore. And he just happened to call me and asked me if I would be willing to dance for that service. I said, okay, so I got there, and he was in rare form. He was kind of, on his, he was not feeling that great. So he was kind of being really strict and just kind of back to the old him, that I knew when I was 6, 7. He was very harsh and just a really hard dance teacher, but loving at the same time. So, I got a chance to do that rehearsal. And we did the service, and he passed that Sunday morning, literally after we did that Thursday Thanksgiving celebration. And just talk about just being in sync and things just happening in the right time. I'm very grateful that I had that experience with him. And he's a big reason why I'm doing this work today. Not just from the dance perspective, because he, really gave me my foundation and sacred dance and praise dance and what it meant to be a vessel, using dance as a vehicle for healing for other people and for yourself. But also just in, when I first started working with him, he made the decision to, he sat us all down and he told us that he had HIV and AIDS, and tried to explain to us what that meant and, what that might look like over the years and what was the risk and because, we were all like, he was really like an uncle to everybody, or, a father figure to some, myself included. And so to hear this news, I know I was very young at the time, but I know for the girls in the group who were like older, like teenage, like they really knew what it meant to have HIV and AIDS in the 90s. And, it was like the prospects were just like, just bad. And so, so the next day in service, he shared his story with our entire congregation of thousands. And in order to, and like did not hide the fact that I remember literally him saying, I contracted HIV and AIDS from having sex with a man. And it was just, I don't think I'd ever heard the word sex in church, but I think everybody was just like, oh my God. But I remember a lot of people crying and just being very like, I could just tell that they were really scared about like what was coming. And so, but he did that as a way to start the conversation of like of AIDS prevention in the Black community, because it was not a conversation that was being had like at all. And so many Black people were dying, so many Black gay men were dying. A lot of women were being infected because of men who, felt like they had to stay in the closet or live, a double life. And so, their partners or their girlfriends or whatever, the women that they were just sleeping with were being infected. And then also, it was just spreading so rapidly. And, it was just really difficult time. So he started that conversation, and, then they started having like a support group of people who had HIV and AIDS, and, passing out condoms and like just things that you just normally don't expect to see at a church. But,
totally.
Pastor Wright was just very, very adamant about like, if we can save lives, like, let's do it, and I know for a fact that he has, pulled many teens and many adults out of situations that, could have really been life-threatening. And I remember in our performance work, because what we would do is like travel to different high schools and different like community settings, and we would do a dance or two, and then he would talk. And so in the talk, we would all go down the line, and he would say, okay, so I would like you to, say your name and like what's your status and your age or something like that. So like all the other kids were like, my name's Susie, I'm 19, and, I'm not HIV positive, or whatever. And I'm just thinking, like, if I'm HIV positive, that means I'm having sex, and I'm like 7. So this is just a hilarious moment. So every time we did this experience, I was always like, I'm Rashida, I'm 7, no. Just like cutting it off really quick. But, he was like, he was just such a huge anchor in my life. And I just, I'm just very grateful to have had him as a guide. And, I believe that he is a part of the reason why I'm doing this work that I'm doing today. And, everything that he kind of instilled in me, to this day, I can hear him bickering. And, but he was just to have like, to be a Black gay man and to have such a radical relationship with God, like one that really, surpassed like, I'm just going to pray about it, or, I'm, like being really passive.
Yeah.
And I know some people don't think prayer is not passive. It's definitely a form of action, but it's like, it can't stop there, to see someone who, did the prayer, did the meditation, did the dance, and then went out, like, and was constantly working his faith muscle. It was just, I knew that there was hope. And so when I came out, I didn't have, I didn't have the support from my family that I really needed. But I knew in my mind, I'm like, if he can do it and he can like, still lead a very, beautiful life, like that there's hope for me. Like this is, it's not over,
Yeah.
And so really had to, I think after his death, I pretty much left my old church. It was just, sometimes you just need to transition.
Yeah. Not the same.
Yeah, it's just a lot of pain and heartbreak around that, and I needed to move. And I think that was when my journey started, in just like a search for like what it meant to make God very personal for me. And when I was talking about going back to the service in Brazil, seeing them dance, it was very different from the praise dance that I had experienced like in my own church, because they were moving their bodies in such a way that was just, you could recognize it as sensual on the surface, but I thinking back on it now, I know it to just be that they were just in such a deep communion with God, and just it was just very intimate and very sacred, and it was like surrendered. Like I don't really know how else to describe it, but those are not words that we necessarily associate with like having a relationship with God. Like, I think that.
Well, we do. The people who listen to the show, a lot of people get it. And I think that's part of the cool thing of what we get to do. And this is why I think there can't possibly be enough people doing this kind of work or having these conversations.
Yeah.
Because with sexuality and sensuality so intertwined, even though they're quite separate, although they can be related.
Yeah.
And the way people separate God from all of that, even though like one of the things I say all the time is like our intuition, which is really just like God speaking through us in whatever sense that anyone relates to God, speaks through us by means of desire, by emotion, and through the unique language of our senses, So that's one way to actually look at interpreting, like, what's God trying to tell you right now? I don't know. What does it feel like in your body?
Right.
Cool. So
even the idea of like, I lost my train of thought, but if it comes back to me, I'll say it.
So we don't really have time to get into it, but I wanted to mention it because we're going to put a link to it in the show notes. In our last conversation, you had told us, we'll have you back. Well, we have like a million more things to talk about. Let's be serious. You talked about a documentary, just like the 30-second overview. You made like a documentary film. What was it about? And we found the link. It's at the show notes. This is episode number 139. So it'll be at untameyourself.com/episode -139 if you want to see what Rashida's about to tell us about.
So it's not a documentary, but it's just a short film.
Sorry, I was building it up just in case.
No, totally fine. It's a short film about a woman who has experienced a really traumatic loss, and she is trying to find her way back to standing and back to, living a vibrant life. And in the show notes, they can read the entire story and how my own story connects to the film. And I'd love to continue that conversation for those of you, who have questions or like it resonates with you. Like just reach out.
Super cool. Thank you so much.
Thank
As
you.
I suspected, great. Here's what was great about this conversation. So for people, this is a cool opportunity to kind of model something I'm super passionate about. When we realized that we lost Rashida's interview, we just like literally didn't know what the hell was going on with the files. We could have been really upset, pissed off. Oh no, I could have reached out to you, apologized, not even asked you to do it again, because I would have been like, what an imposition. We already did this. But I was like, nope. Guess that wasn't the one that people needed to hear. And the whole conversation that specifically that has evolved, the body stuff is great. But to me, the more important thing that I believe people may or may not get a lot out of or get the nugget to chew on that ends up being like the slow burning thing that evolves over time is how important it is to develop a personal relationship with God. Again, whatever is the context with in which that someone relates, whether it's God or the universe, and whether it's like you even have that relationship right now or are just curious about it and want to just keep going. Because when you are curious about that, like so many of Rashida's stories, these serendipitous or synchronistic things like happen, the connections, the people, the travel, the culture, being involved in like a mystical thing that you didn't even know was possible. You know, like we're not special. Things like that don't happen to us and not available to you. If you are curious and you start asking, and whatever it is, prayer, meditation, dance, your access point, and your access points can change over time. That stuff's totally available for you if you're interested. So there's a little, I don't usually end the show on a soapbox, but it's my show. I do what I want. So thank you so much. We'll put all the stuff in the show notes. People can know where to find you. You're so great. I'm so glad we got our technology figured out, and we'll talk to you again.
All right.
My friend and I in Kauai, we both had brick and mortar businesses in Kauai, and we took two different paths. Yeah. Like she was like, never again will I start my own business. So just to share the mindset where me, I was like, oh, that business, brick and mortar doesn't work for me. Is there another way? Because I knew I'm kind of unemployable at this point. You know, once you work on your own, it's like, eek. So it's just like that mindset that we took on in those paths. We both had brick and mortar businesses. They didn't work out. We shut them down. And then she went into the path of actually finishing school and working for other people, where I was just like, I love working for myself. That wasn't the right like suit for me.